Hi, everyone. I'm Karen MacNeil, author of the Wine Bible and editor of the digital newsletter WineSpeed. And this is WineSpeed.com's People to Know, insider interviews with the most fascinating and important people in the wine business. And today, I am so excited that we have Ron Washam. Ron has been one of the few satirists writing about wine and the wine industry for more than a decade. He published his blog, TheHoseMasterofWine, from 2008 until 2019. After graduating with a degree in English and Comparative Literature from Occidental College, Washam worked as a comedy writer for NBC. In 1987, he was hired as a sommelier for the Pacific Dining Car in Los Angeles, where he worked for 19 years and won 2 awards as Best Sommelier of the Year. He's written for Robert Parker's Wine Advocate and also for British wine writer Tim Atkin's site, timatkin.com. Ron, welcome. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, so you wrote comedy for a number of years for NBC and other places. Tell us about that.
Well, I didn't know I was going to do that when I was in college. I was a math major originally and then became a literature major because I couldn't hack the hours that the math majors had to do. So I went to my second love, which was writing. And I always loved comedy, always wrote comedy. And I lucked into an opportunity to work for NBC. A regular at the bar where I was working worked for NBC. He was a kind of a big shot at NBC. And I gave him one of my scripts. A spec script, they call it. I wrote it just for fun. You all had to do that. And I think it was a Taxi episode, the old show Taxi. And I remember the premise now. It's funny, I hadn't thought about this in a long time. The premise was a Jim, you know, the crazy cab driver Jim, that he inadvertently reads his own obituary in the newspaper, which is a mistake. So of course he believes he's dead. So that's the premise I used. And he loved the script and he basically hired me. So I worked I was basically a staff writer. So I got assigned to things, write a pilot for this comic, go into this. There was the era of dramedies. So you get put onto a show like James at 8, James at 16, you know, go in there and make a funny episode for them. Not one where grandma dies, you know, one of those kind of lighter ones. So I did a lot of that. And I ended up not liking it. I didn't like television and working in television. And I think, and so I did about, I don't know, 3 years, 4 years, and I quit. I left.
I'm surprised it can be done at all. Like if someone says, you know, we need something funny. What do? You close yourself in your bedroom and you try and think funny thoughts? I mean,
no,
how do you actually do it?
I don't know. I think I started writing jokes when I was 12 or maybe younger. And Mad Magazine, of course, everybody refers to that. That's what's the funny magazine. And I learned how to write jokes from that. And I was just fascinated by comedy. I still have a lot of old LPs from, oh gosh, Bill Cosby and Bob Newhart and the Smothers Brothers and all those things that I listened to endlessly in order to learn timing and jokes. And then when you're writing professionally, you have a standard to write to. I have to write jokes for Jay Leno. It's different than writing jokes for Stephen Colbert or any other stand-up. So you have to, one of the things you have to learn to do is to write under every sort of circumstance. That comedy is a broad thing like wine is. There's not one kind of comedy. They're very
and comedy is very different than wine. How do you go from something funny to something that most people consider quite serious? Like why, how and why did you go to wine?
I think like most people, it just sort of happened. I didn't really intend it. I was working, I'd worked part-time as a waiter in college. And when I was 21, I was working at a great restaurant in Pasadena called The Chronicle, which had an enormous wine list, maybe the best wine list in the country in the 1970s. Well over 1,000 wines on the list. That was very unusual then. You had every great first growth. You had all the great Bordeaux. You had great Burgundies. You had great Italians. You had everything. California as well. And I started to taste with the sommelier because he offered it to me, and I fell in love with wine. So then I became the comedy thing, and I got out of comedy. I went back to work in restaurants to support myself. And I ended up, I'd never fallen out of love with wine. And I ended up getting an opportunity to be a sommelier at Pacific Dining Car through a weird series of events, and ended up getting that job and did it for 20 years. And it was a lot of fun. I don't see it's like I have two different parts of my life. You know, there's wine and there's comedy. I don't see them in similar ways at all. And so it's almost just switch gears. If I sit down to be funny, it's a different person than the person that sits down and analyzes a glass of wine.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well,
It's weird.
and you're not just funny. I mean, in particular, you write satire, and I'm going to define satire for everyone who's listening. This is from various reference books, a kind of amalgamated definition, but satire is, quote, trenchant wit, irony, or sarcasm used to expose and discredit individual vices, follies, abuses, or shortcomings. Now, the Hosemaster certainly is satire, and some people have found it over the years really severe, even mean-spirited, and you've been actually sued by people.
Yes, I have.
And as far as I can see, no one has escaped your wrath.
No.
Like, why do it?
Because somebody has to. It's not. I always heard the same thing about the wine business when I was in it and not writing comedy at all. You know, that it takes itself too seriously. That there's no humor in the wine business. There's a little light spirit, but nothing that's actually funny. And I kept thinking that. And then when the opportunity came, when blogs came around, I decided to do it. Then I thought, well, I can do that. And satire, to me, is one of the great art forms. It's often said that satire speaks truth to power. I don't see that. My feeling is more that what I try to do is find other people's truth and take it apart. and that's what makes you laugh, is because if I nail what you think your truth is, who you think you are, what you're preaching or what you stand for, and then I can take it apart and make people look at you in a different way and see you in a different light, then that's what satire is for. And it's a necessary thing, because all of us take ourselves too seriously. And when you know you did it, I always know I did it right when I get the hate mail. When I get the lawsuit, when I get the hate mail, I think, yeah, right on the nose. And if I get no response, I think, oh man, that's horrible. Yeah. I didn't write all satire. I wrote all kinds of stuff, but I got known for being particularly, mean-spirited, but that's the tradition of satire. Yes,
that is. And I have to say, I mean, I was terrified the first time I met you, because I knew you were in the room. We were at this big event. I knew you were in the room, and I thought, I have to stay on the other side of the room, because I don't want this man to know me. You had already satirized me a little bit, and I had burst out laughing because you had so nailed me that I had to not be angry. It was just very hysterically funny.
Well, I often, go ahead, I'm sorry.
But no, I was so here I was terrified. Imagine my surprise when some months later, I discover that you're actually a really nice guy.
Thank you.
What is this, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde?
Yeah, imagine my surprise when it turns out you're really mean. No, that's the funny thing about when you do comedy or when you do any form of satire. The hose master isn't me. It's a character that I've lived with and created, since I started writing, 40 years of it. So it's my voice. It's no more me than, Jerry Seinfeld is Jerry Seinfeld in real life. You create this persona, as everybody does on the internet these days. All dating sites are made up characters. They're just not very fleshed out. Mine's
so
a little more, mine's a little more hateable than those people, arguably. So people are often surprised that I'm actually kind of nice. I think that's normally pretty true. I think if you think of all the mean comics, the Don Rickles and the guys that were thought of as being insult comics, and everybody who knew them in real life said they were sweethearts. But it's funny how you can be that. It's an odd to be able to switch that on. And I'll think about making fun of parodying you or going after you a little bit. I always say the same thing. You can only parody and satirize people with talent, people that are good. if writers that are lousy, I mean, they're self-parody. You can't do anything about it. When I make fun of you or Terry Thies or Jancis or somebody like that, I've got a lot to work with because there's so much to your voice that it's kind of fun. I get to be you sort of in a weird way. I
Well,
wear a red wig and it's fun.
Hey, they don't make wigs this big, you know? I mean, they cost more anyway.
Yeah, true.
Well, I know that there are people in the wine industry actually who only feel that they've arrived if they've been satirized by you. I mean, that's true. It really is. But what I want to ask you is, who was like the most fun person to satirize?
Oh gosh. You know, oddly, it wasn't wine writers so much because there's little leeway in what to talk about. Wine writers are sort of, you know, you're focused on what you do, and that's interesting. But I used to always do. I would occasionally do like Andy Rooney talking about wine. He was already dead, but he has such a distinct patter, and I could hear his voice in my head. So doing Andy Rooney talking about wine was a lot of fun. So doing other people talking about wine that had nothing to do with wine, and I would do. I do Lenny Bruce on wine. I did, you know, Rodney Dangerfield on wine, and because that took me back to my old days of writing stand-up for total strangers. We had to learn their style. So the joy of it for me was always, in order to parody somebody, you have to really pick apart what they do. And so somebody, when I read you, it's way different than if I read Terry Thies or if I read Hugh Johnson. The pace, the word choice, the rhythm. And for me, the joy is figuring that out.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of fun. And then when I can make it funny, people used to always, honestly, I did have a lot of people say to me, why don't you go after me one day? And my answer was always the same. You're really not very important.
I bet that went over well.
Oh, the looks on their faces were priceless. It was fun. And also the other side of that coin is, I also would say, be careful what you wish for, because a few people that I went after, I really never heard from again that I'd sort of been friendly with, and I didn't mind. Yeah, it's part of the hate mail thing. You got to love your hate mail.
Yeah. Well, you know, you've gone after Psalms a lot, mercilessly, even just Psalms as a category, as a concept. Mm-hmm. And yet you yourself, of course, were a terrific Psalm. You continue to be a wine judge. Were given awards for being a Psalm.
Yeah.
What was it about, what is it about Psalmness that is so ripe for satire? Is it the fact that they take themselves seriously?
No, I think that's the image of them. I don't think that that's actually true. I think to a huge degree, they reek of insecurity. Mm. They're specializing in something that's really esoteric, and at the end of the day, not filled with meaning. In the scale of things, you're not studying epidemiology. You're not an EMT. So to take yourself so seriously, to put letters after your name, this to me is the height of foolishness. I would always call them surname dingleberries. You know, just brush them off. They smell. Get rid of them. Who cares? So because I've done the job for 20 years, you can say things like that. It's the same with wine. I can satirize wine, the wine business, because I've been part of it for as long as most of the people I'm making fun of. So it's not like I'm coming out of nowhere. So it's been fun. I haven't done it. I haven't published for about a year, but and I don't miss it. But I did 600 pieces at least in 10 years, so that's a lot of satire. But I think about it all the time. Still, I don't write it, but I think about it. There's a lot to still say.
Yes, I'm sure there is. Well, our complete interview with Ron Washam is on winespeed.com's People to Know page. You won't want to miss it. Check it out.
Thank you. It was fun.